You picked up a tool today without even noticing. Maybe it was a fork, maybe it was your phone. Your hand just knew what to do with it because your brain has been shaped by tools for millions of years. But here's the part that should stop you cold. There was a moment, a specific creature, a specific choice, when a hand picked up a sharp-edged rock for the first time and changed the entire future of our lineage. Not a modern human, not even close. Something smaller, weaker, and far more vulnerable than you'd expect. And if that creature had failed, if it had starved or been eaten before passing that trick on, you might not exist to read this sentence. This is the story of Homo Habilis. The name literally means handyman, but don't let the name fool you into picturing something clever and in control. This was one of the most fragile, most outmatched creatures ever to gamble its survival on a new idea. And somehow, against odds that should have crushed it, that gamble worked. Reframe, not the hero. You're picturing. Here's what you think you know about early humans. Bigger brains, cleverer tools, a slow climb up some ladder of progress. What you're picturing is closer to the end of the story. Homo habilis is the beginning, and the beginning was brutal. Picture East Africa around 2.5 million years ago. The climate was shifting hard. Dense forest was giving way to open, dry savanna. Food sources that ancestors had relied on for millions of years, fruit, soft leaves, were vanishing with the trees. And into that shrinking world walked a creature standing barely 4 feet tall, with a brain about 1/3 the size of yours. No claws worth mentioning, no powerful jaw, no speed to outrun a predator. By almost every physical measure, Homo habilis was a snack waiting to happen. So here's the real question. In a landscape crawling with lions, hyenas, and saber-toothed cats, how does the weakest creature in the room not just survive, but eventually win? Enemy 1. Everything wants to eat. You start with the obvious threat. Homo habilis lived in a world stacked with predators built for exactly this kind of prey. Fossil evidence from sites in Tanzania and Kenya shows bite marks and puncture wounds on hominin bones that match the teeth of big cats. This wasn't an occasional danger. Predation was a constant grinding pressure. Here's where it gets strange, though. Homo habilis didn't outmuscle or outrun these predators. It outthought the entire problem, using a strategy so simple it barely sounds impressive until you understand what it actually required. Group living. Sticking close together in numbers made any single individual harder to isolate and pick off. It sounds obvious now, but it demanded something no earlier ape-like ancestor had needed nearly as much. Coordination, awareness of others, the beginnings of shared attention. Researchers studying the social structure implied by habilis fossil clusters argue this pressure may have nudged early hominins toward more complex group behavior long before language existed. Safety wasn't found in strength, it was found in each other, but surviving predators only solves one part of the puzzle. Staying alive that long meant nothing if you couldn't also eat. Enemy 2. A body built for food. It could no longer get. Here's the part nobody talks about. As the forests thinned, the easy food went with them. Ripe fruit, tender shoots, all the soft plant material earlier hominins had relied on became scarce and seasonal. Homo habilis had a body poorly suited for the fallback option. Tough, fibrous vegetation that needed serious chewing power to process. Its jaw and teeth were already smaller and weaker than those of its more robust cousins living in the same landscape. And that's not a small detail. Sharing the savanna with Homo habilis was another hominin, Paranthropus boisei, nicknamed by researchers Nutcracker Man for its massive jaw and molars built to grind down coarse plants all day. Paranthropus had the jaw for a plant-heavy world. Homo habilis did not. On paper, Paranthropus should have won this competition easily. So how did the smaller, weaker-jawed cousin end up as our direct ancestor, while Paranthropus eventually vanished entirely? The answer is stone. The turning point, a sharp edge and a carcass. At sites like Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, excavated by Louis and Mary Leakey starting in the 1930s, archaeologists uncovered something that rewrote the understanding of early human behavior. Deliberately shaped stone tools, later named the Oldowan Toolkit, dating back roughly 2.5 million years. These weren't naturally broken rocks. They were struck with precision, one stone against another, to produce a sharp cutting edge. And that sharp edge unlocked an entire food source that had been sitting there unused the whole time: meat and marrow from animal carcasses. Here's the strategy in practice. Homo habilis almost certainly wasn't hunting large game directly, not with that body. Instead, evidence increasingly points to scavenging, moving in after a lion or another predator had already made a kill and eaten its fill, then using stone tools to strip whatever meat remained and, critically, to crack open the bones for marrow. Cut marks found on animal bones at these sites, sitting directly beneath or overlapping tooth marks from carnivores, tell that exact story. The predators ate first. Homo habilis came second, armed with nothing but sharpened rock and a plan. Marrow mattered enormously here. It's a dense, fat-rich food that most predators can't access without serious effort, but that a simple stone tool could crack open in seconds. Homo habilis had found a loophole in the food chain, a rich energy source almost nobody else was competing for. And this is where the real payoff shows up. That fat and protein didn't just keep individuals alive through lean seasons. Across generations, researchers argue this shift in diet likely helped fuel something extraordinary: brain growth. Brain tissue is metabolically expensive, and a richer, more reliable source of calories may have helped make slightly larger brains biologically affordable for the first time. A small hand, a sharp rock, and, generation by generation, a bigger brain. That is not a small chain of events. That is the entire trajectory of our species, starting to bend. Enemy 3. The long odds of just not dying. Even with tools, survival stayed razor-thin. Homo habilis fossils show clear signs of a short, hard life. Estimated lifespans rarely stretched past the 20s or 30s. Childhood was almost certainly dangerous and slow, since a body that grows this way needs years of protection before it can fend for itself. That protection had to come from somewhere, most likely from a group willing to share food and watch over the vulnerable. Here's the part nobody talks about. Again, tool-making itself wasn't instinct. It had to be learned, watched, repeated, corrected, which means somebody had to teach it. A skill this valuable, cracking a rock into a precise cutting edge, doesn't spread through a population by accident. It spreads because someone demonstrated it, and someone else paid close enough attention to copy it. That's not just tool use. That is the earliest visible fingerprint of teaching, patience, and shared knowledge passed between individuals, millions of years before anything resembling written history. What it built step back and the whole picture snaps into focus. Homo habilis wasn't strong. It wasn't fast. It didn't have the jaw to win a chewing contest against Paranthropus, and it certainly wasn't winning any fight against a lion. What it had was a sharpened stone and the willingness to use it to solve a problem that raw biology alone couldn't solve. That one adaptation, turning rock into a tool, cracked open a food source, which helped fuel a bigger brain, which allowed for more complex behavior, more learning, more cooperation. Every later chapter in the human story, bigger brains, better tools, language, culture, arguably traces its roots back to this exact moment. A small, outmatched creature on an East African savanna, refusing to lose. And now look at what's sitting in your pocket, or in your hand, right now. A phone that holds more information than every library Homo habilis' descendants would build for the next 2 million years. You didn't invent your ability to shape the world with a tool. You inherited it from a creature you'll never see a photograph of, who left nothing behind but broken stones and the outline of a bigger brain in fossilized skull. You don't think about survival anymore. Not really. You think about traffic, deadlines, what to eat for dinner. And that's not because the struggle disappeared. It's because 2.5 million years ago, something small, slow, and outmatched picked up a rock, sharpened an edge, and refused to accept the odds it had been handed. If you want more stories like this, the ones buried in bone and stone that quietly explain who we are, stick around. There's a lot more history sitting under the dirt.